general from Israel said to me recently that the present situation could easily go on for another 10 years unchanged. But you have grandchildren. They will live presumably well into the next century. What do you see in the long term if we don't get a break in the present stalemate?
Mr. Fell, I am convinced, honestly, sincerely believe that my grandchildren will live in an area of peace in the Middle East. Because there are other grandmothers in Egypt and in Syria and in Jordan that have grandchildren, and they also want them to live, irrespective of what Nasser thinks or Hussein thinks. The grandmothers and the mothers want their children to live. Now, if you say, when will that come? I don't know.
Prime Minister, what has been the effect of your policy of retaliation against Egypt?
Casualties of our boys on the canal have dropped to a very large extent. People forget there is, on the 10th of June, 1967, the Security Council of the United Nations adopted a resolution for ceasefire. The Arab countries, Egypt and Syria and the others, but as far as the canal is concerned, Egypt and we accepted. We're prepared to go back to that any minute. We've been saying this over and over again. We want peace. As long as there's no peace, ceasefire. Then let us, all of us, abide by the resolution of ceasefire. Ceasefire means that everything on the canal must be absolutely quiet, no shooting. The minute that Nasser says that he's prepared, we'll be happy to comply. But if there is shooting, then nobody can really tell us, now look, you must do exactly the same what the Egyptians do. They're a solid wall of men and tanks and guns. You have fewer, but that doesn't make any difference. You must only use the same way of shooting and shelling. There are no rules of that kind. But as long as Nasser does not abide by the ceasefire, he announced publicly that he doesn't recognize that there is a state of ceasefire and keeps on shooting, there's nothing in the world that can force us to use exactly the same methods as he uses against us. Then we're at a disadvantage of manpower and number of tanks and guns. He has a solid wall of men and arms facing us. We haven't. Therefore, we must use the most effective way that we can in order that our men should not be there just at his service to be killed.
Prime Minister, is it your intention to bomb civilians when you have raids on the outskirts and suburbs of Cairo?
Is there a country in the world that was at war that can really say never, never, never have they, against their desire and against their intention, hit somebody or hit something that has resulted in a tragedy?
But isn't your present policy of bombing on the outskirts of Cairo likely to lead to other such mistakes or tragedies? I mean, for instance, it only needs one of your planes to be shot down and plough through a school or a hospital. These things must be reckoned for.
Yes, but we didn't put military installations next to Cairo. We didn't plan it that way. And the fact is that there was only one instance of this kind. And everybody that sends out, everybody that's at war, knows that this has happened. We're terribly sorry this has happened. How many instances do people know in the world where two parties that are at war, that one should warn another party, look, there's a bomb there, take care of it. Because as soon as we realized that this terrible mistake was made, we acted. I mean,
What was
it's I don't want to be in the equal moral basis as our neighbors. But for 2.5 years, there is shelling from across the Jordanian border, and civilians, our children, are in shelters, living in shelters for 2.5 years. I haven't seen, nor read, nor heard that the world was so horrified.
Do you consider you're on a superior moral basis to the Arabs?
I think yes. I'm not happy to say that, because we intend to remain in this neighborhood. And we're convinced that the day of peace will come, and we want to cooperate with them. And when there will be peace, I think there will be no difference.
When Prime Minister, Egyptian kids are taught to hate Israel, aren't you in fact driving the lesson home to them?
That's the beginning of their hatred?
No, but it drives it endorses it, doesn't it?
But do you believe that we wanted to hurt their fathers or their mothers, whoever were in the factories? Let me tell you a story that I only heard yesterday, which is typical. In one of our kibbutzim right across the Jordan, that has been shelled day and night, and there are children there that don't know any other home except air shelters. And at one of the shelling, the father with a little boy of 4 was in the shelter, and the child was scared and cried. And the father said, "Look, don't worry. These are not the shells from the other side. These are our shells." And the child said, "Do they have shelters for the children on the other side?" He said, "Because, the children are not to blame that their fathers are Fatah. Our children are not taught to hate."
Mrs. Meir, if it was business, nobody makes a profit without risk, and the profit that you are going to make here is peace. Isn't it worth some risk for a short period?
We think enough of our people have been killed for no reason whatsoever. And I refuse to believe that this is something that only we can profit by it. As long as people believe that peace is something, some kind of luxury that the Israelis have gotten into their minds that that's what they would like to have. And therefore, if they want this luxury, they have to pay for it.
Prime Minister, you always talk about direct negotiations with the Arabs. But what possible incentive for the Arabs to sit down at a table with you when everybody you speak to in Israel conveys the impression that you're there to stay on the Golan Heights, in Jerusalem, even on the West Bank? Why should they sit down? What are they going to get?
What do we say? We say no preconditions. Let's sit down and negotiate. And we say Israel wants secure and agreed borders.
But you go throughout the territories that you conquered in 1967, Mrs. Meir, and you find Israel digging in a very permanent way. What possible reason have the Arabs to think that you really intend to go from any of them?
People say to us, pull back to the borders of 1967, and then there will be peace. We were at the borders of 1967, in June in 1967, and in May 1967. Why was there war? And immediately after the war, we said, let us sit down and negotiate peace. They didn't do it. And we say now, we've been saying it over and over again, let us sit down and negotiate a peace which we say will be with an attempt to have agreed borders.
No preconditions, not even Jerusalem?
We say no preconditions before we sit down. Nasser will also come with some ideas, and we will come with some ideas. Of course we will. I don't say that when we sit down at the table, we have nothing to negotiate for. Nasser will have nothing to negotiate for.
Has there been a single moment since 1967 when you thought that the Arabs were ready to talk?
No. Because this is something that must be realized by people in the world, and unless they realize that, there is no understanding of the entire situation. our quarrel with the Arabs is not a quarrel for a piece of land. It's not for territory. It's not for anything concrete. They just refuse to believe that we have the right to exist at all.
But surely for the people who were here in 48, who have left then, surely for the Jordanians who are now on the other side of the Jordan, surely for them it's land. And don't you understand them and their desire to come back?
Why did they leave?
Well, many of them were refugees of war. Maybe they don't like a conquered
But
army.
who made the war? They don't like a conquered army. Therefore, we should leave. Oh, that I understand. Yes, then we can have peace in this area.
But
Without Israel in this area, there won't be peace. The Arabs are not so friendly with each other. But that's none of my business. Oh, this is a solution.
But I have a feeling
It just happens that there are 14 Arab countries and immense territories. And we've come back. We've been here before.
2,000 years
And we've
ago.
come back.
2,000 years ago.
Yes. What did we take away from the Arabs when we came back? We didn't want to live with them in peace. We asked them to leave. We didn't accept the partition of Mr. Churchill in 1922 and the partition of the UN in 1947. We didn't say yes. What difference is there between Arabs who were on this side of the Jordan and the other side of the Jordan? Arabs in the East Bank and the west of the border of the West Bank. I mean, when were Palestinians born? What was all this area before the First World War? When Britain got the mandate over Palestine, what was Palestine then? Palestine was then the area between the Mediterranean and the Iraqi border.
You say there is no such thing as a
East
Palestinian.
and West Bank, no. East and West Bank was Palestine. I'm a Palestinian. From 21 until 48, I carried a Palestinian passport. There was no such thing in this area as Jews and Arabs and Palestinians. There were Jews and Arabs.
Don't you... I mean, you deny that there was a Palestine Arab people before, but there is now a Palestine liberation movement. The history of liberation movements are that they grow. Won't this one grow and become in fact, your biggest enemy?
I don't say there are no Palestinians, but I say there is no such thing as a distinct Palestinian people of all the Palestinians who live in Jordan. Why have the Palestinians in the West Bank become more Palestinians since the 5th of June 67 than they were before? Why didn't they set up a Palestinian country in addition to Jordan? Supposing your premise is right, then what should they have done? They should have set up another independent Palestine and fought from there. They didn't do that. They adopted the fact that they are in Jordan. They've adopted the Jordanian citizens. They are the majority in Jordan. They are in parliament. They are in government. What has happened since? Why have they become more Palestinian conscious since the War of 67? I mean, people, decent people, liberal people, people that are for self-determination, sympathize with Palestinians. Everybody has the right to self-determine except we. We're the only people in the world to whom it is not given the right for self-determination. We have to be, evidently, minorities all over the world, and we have no right for independence. The Arabs are prepared to negotiate with us? Which Arab? Where? When? If you know of an Arab leader, head of state that wants to negotiate with us, by all means, tell us. I'm prepared to go to Cairo, I'm prepared to go to Damascus, I'm prepared to go to Amman, I'm prepared to go to Beirut. Anywhere.
You would go to these places?
Yes. Happily. To negotiate peace, of course.
What would be your first words to President Nasser if you did ever sit at the table with him?
I would say shalom. means peace.
Prime Minister, do you believe that if Nasser falls, you'll get anything better in his place?
Something we don't speculate about. I don't remember exactly that we have had a voice in putting Nasser in where he is, and it's not our business nor within our power to put him out and to put somebody else in.
Don't you believe that
All
your
I
rates
believe is that it can't be worse. No matter who comes in his place, it can't be worse.
One notices in this country that people never forget the war, that they listen to every news bulletin, every hour on the hour. You, of course, presumably know the news beforehand. Can you tell me how this affects you?
First place, my first choice would be not to be a prime minister. My second choice would be to be a prime minister in the same position as all other prime ministers who have their troubles, I'm sure, and have their difficulties. How does it affect? I'm one of our people that every boy that is wounded on the canal or somewhere else is a wound in the hearts of all of us. Don't necessarily have to know him or his family. It's difficult. And that's why we value life, not only our own. Just we value life. And this is our strength. Maybe one can say this is our weakness because the Arab leaders are not so sensitive to the very question of life, of having people alive instead of dead. Otherwise there would be no wars.
Do you ever doubt the correctness of your policy?
No, sir. What do you mean, my policy? Our policy is to keep our people alive and to keep our independence. How can anybody doubt the right that we have that is similar to the right of 125 peoples in the world?
Do you ever sometimes feel that perhaps you might just have stayed in America and been happier and lived a nicer life?
I didn't run away from America. America was kind to me and to my parents. I was brought up there. I enjoyed everything that the United States can give. But I never regretted for 1 second that I didn't remain there and that I came here.
But if you were brought up in America, what possible right have you to live in a land that was once Arab, whether he neglected it and left it a stony desert or not?
I came to Merhavia when there was nothing there. This land was deserted for centuries. We were driven out of this land. Is this where history begins? Twice we were driven out of this land, occupied by other powers. The Arabs, this is the only people, the Jewish people, whose life, independence, dignity depends on this piece of soil. The only people in the world, not the Arabs. They have this entire territory, the entire vast area, 14 independent countries.
Isn't time, though, on their side, whatever you do?
Why?
Because they talk of fighting for 100 years, they talk of their population growing. Isn't time on their side?
I don't believe it. You mean you want me to believe that things will never change? That they will go on shooting and killing? You want me to believe that generation after generation of young people in the Arab countries will have no other ideal except to kill Jews? I don't believe it.
You are hopeful?
I'm positive that this will not happen. I don't know how long this war will go on.
Prime Minister, thank you very much.
Thank you.
The instrument of the commander, the gunner's instrument is almost the same. This thing is for the driver. He's got infrared lights and he can drive invisible. A projector called xenon for white light and infrared. With white light we can see
Aren't you getting less and less ready to contemplate withdrawal as the time goes by?
No. The government hasn't changed its attitude from the very beginning. Now, I want to say this, in all honesty. It's possible, had the Arabs accepted the call of the Israel government immediately after the war was over, and Israel said, now let's sit down and negotiate for a secure, agreed, and recognized borders. It's possible, had they immediately come forward, instead of the answer that they gave us in Khartoum, no recognition, no peace, no negotiations, and have actually been saying this all the time, except that now Hussein and Sadat before him said, yes, peace, yes, but on our terms. It's quite possible that the attitude of the Israel government, the Israel people, would have been the one that said, well, all right, again there was a war, but now this time the Arabs have come to a conclusion that they have to live in peace with us.
Isn't the reality of the situation, though, that most Israelis now don't want to withdraw? Whatever the Arabs offer in exchange, they just don't want to pull back. Whatever you may say as Prime Minister.
I don't know on what you base what most of the Israelis want. I think that most of the Israelis back the attitude and the decisions of the Israel government, in this case at least, and most of the Israelis, I would say all of the Israelis, want peace.
And you are prepared to withdraw from, you yourself said, from...
The ceasefire lines.
Yes, in places you're prepared to return most of certain Arab territories in exchange for that peace.
I don't know. Where, I think that it depends upon where. It depends upon where.
Sinai and the West Bank are the obvious places, one thinks.
Well, I think in Sinai, now I say, there is no decision of the Israel government. But if you ask me, I think that there's no doubt that Egypt would get a great part of the Sinai.
Except Sharm el-Sheikh and the road to Sharm el-Sheikh.
Well, Sharm el-Sheikh, of course not. And there must be territorial connection between Sharm el-Sheikh and Israel, which means changes in the borders, of course. But where the line will be, I couldn't tell you.
Your position is still the same as it always was, that if they want to find out where that line is, they must sit down and talk to you.
Right.
Are you still saying, as you said originally, that everything is negotiable?
We said we make no conditions to the Arabs. They can put on the table for negotiations anything they want.
But is there any point in their putting on the table? They're
We'll
demanding they have
discuss
Jerusalem
it.
back.
Why should we promise them things beforehand?
But is there any point in the putting on the table? A proposal that they have back East Jerusalem?
Is there any point for them putting on the table that we go back to the 67 line? When we've said since the very day after the war, we will not return to the 67 line. We say we will not give back Jerusalem. Jerusalem will remain a united city, the capital of Israel. We are anxious, not only prepared, but anxious to come to an agreement with the representatives of religions that have holy places in Jerusalem. Christian, Muslim. We have no interest, no ambition, no desire, no need to administer holy places of anybody else. Naturally, the city is open and free to everybody, as it is now. But can we just, in a few words, go back to the history of Jerusalem, not ancient history. In 1947, the United Nations decided that Israel is an international city. Jerusalem. We accepted, with broken hearts, because a Jewish state without Jerusalem is something that one can hardly envisage, but we said yes. The Arabs said no. They shelled Jerusalem. Abdullah took the old city of Jerusalem, not through serenading, not through prayers. He sent in his Arab legion. We weren't strong enough to protect it, and he took the old city of Jerusalem. It was supposed to have been an international city. Nobody came to save the holiness of the holy city. It was shelled and cut in two. Jordan never for one day lived up to its undertaking and the armistice agreements, where we were to have access to the holy places.
Did you respect your side of the international city bargain? I mean, isn't Jerusalem now the capital? Wasn't it the capital of Israel before 1967?
Yes, after 1948.
You said, oh, well, if Abdullah can grab the east part, we can then take the west part as part of Israel.
How could it have remained an international city when half of it was gone? And when in 1967 it was shelled again by Jordan all over again. Now he wasn't anxious to occupy the old city. Now evidently he wanted also the other part of the city. Where is the application of a principle which I accept on condition that it holds good for everybody? The inadmissibility of acquiring territory by force.
So,
the old city was acquired by force. The West Bank was acquired by force. Not even force. Abdullah simply announced one bright morning he annexes the West Bank. It was never allotted to him.
Well, he was invited by a gathering of West Bank leaders to come in and annex it, wasn't he? Even if the legality of that gathering was disputed at the time.
All right. Assuming that is so. By the way, if it was so legal, how is it that only two countries in the world, until 1967, recognized the legality of this annexation? It was only Great Britain and Pakistan.
How many countries recognize your occupation of the west city of Jerusalem?
Yes, but nobody has asked questions every other day. Abdullah, why did you annex the Western Bank? But never mind. Then Hussein had the Western Bank. He had the old city. I still ask this question, what else did he want in 1967? He wanted something in addition to the West Bank, in addition to the old city of Jerusalem. I mean, everything that he's had before, he expects back.
But he has talked about Jerusalem being an open, unified city. Isn't that promising for you?
I was touched when I read, if that's what he said, that Jerusalem belongs to Abraham, Jesus, and Muhammad. Well, that's beautifully said. But when did he learn that Abraham had something to do with Jerusalem? When for 19 years we were not allowed to go to the old city, we were not allowed to go to the Wailing Wall, when the synagogues were destroyed, when the cemetery was destroyed. Did he find this out only recently?
You are making it pretty clear, aren't you, that in fact that old line between Israel and Jordan will look nothing like the line that you want to negotiate with Hussein. You want
it will not be the same line. Where it will be, that's a question of negotiation. There are various ideas in the country. You know that very well. Some believe that the Jordan should be the line. Some believe that there's a possibility of negotiating. But
Prime Minister, do you see any sign of an opening at all for peace at the moment? They can expect to gain substantial.
Frankly, at the moment, no. We come back again to the same problem that we were faced with actually immediately after the war of '67. There really should be no reason why we couldn't have had peace throughout these years and why we shouldn't have it now. The only thing that is necessary is for our neighbors to make up their minds that they want peace and that real peace can be achieved between the parties.
But as the time goes by, and as the Arabs and the commandos seem less and less able to attack you, aren't you getting more and more inclined just to stay where you are? Isn't it rather nice having all those territories to occupy?
No. We have other ideals and other dreams. Not to have the boys that we have to keep on the canal. Believe me, they have other dreams and we have other dreams for them. We have a country to build. We have a people to build. We have greater joy in meeting the planes in the little airport with Jews from Russia coming in than from phantom planes. We need phantom planes. We're happy we get them. But there's no joy in getting phantom planes. But there is joy in having El Al planes come in and bring Jews from Russia, from all over the world. We have greater joy meeting a few Jews that can get out of this, it isn't even a prison, Syria or Iraq for Jews, than we have in keeping our boys on the front. We have ideals of a society here, of being a progressive and developed a state. We have no need for more sand or more rocks or even fertile soil. We have taken the Negev, which was sand, and have done something with it. This is joy. And there's a lot of sand more to be developed, and many more rocks in the country. And there are people that have come from underdeveloped countries from 16th, 17th century. And we want to bring them up to 20th, 21st century civilization. This is our joy. These are our dreams. These are our ideals. This is where we want our young people to put their effort in, and not in defending borders.
Hello, I'm Edwin Newman. One of the most booming boom towns in the world is Jerusalem. Everywhere you look, something's going up. Under the pressure of immigration and economic expansion, this is true not only on the Israeli side, but in what used to be Jordanian Jerusalem. On both sides, the boom is evidence that Israel is settling in further as what the Israelis confidently expect to be a permanent part of the Middle East. It is not without significance that the larger part of the construction force working on the boom is Arab. That is true not only in the territories Israel has occupied since the Six-Day War in 1967, but in Israel itself. After a quarter of a century, there is no peace between Israel and the Arab states, but there is a ceasefire, fairly well observed, and there is here and there in the Arab world an inkling of greater acceptance of Israel's existence. Still, there is also, of course, on the part of many Arabs, a persistent and even implacable opposition to Israel, and the Israelis know that real peace may be a long way off and that there may be much trouble ahead. They would be foolish to think anything else. But this is a fairly stable and hopeful time for them, and anyone who has made periodic visits to Israel notices that at once. The world has long since got used to the idea that a woman is in charge of Israel's affairs, Prime Minister Golda Meir. The fact is, an Israeli and world scene without Mrs. Meir would take a lot more getting used to. Mrs. Meir has been Prime Minister since March 1969. Before that, she had a variety of government posts and party posts. She was, among other things, Minister in Moscow and Foreign Minister. And it is Prime Minister Golda Meir who will be speaking freely today. Mrs. Meir, I wonder whether we might begin by speaking of Arab groups of the kind that hijack airplanes and killed Israeli athletes in Munich. They talk a great deal about the Palestinian homeland and how they've been deprived of it. Is there any legitimacy in talk about an Arab-Palestinian homeland?
No, I think not, at any rate. If the homeland that is referred to is supposed to be Israel, I think it would be worthwhile just to take a minute, go back a little bit in history. For instance, before the First World War, there were no independent Arab countries. This area, that is Israel today, and as a matter of fact, up to the Jordan, was considered the southern part of Syria. When, after the war, Great Britain got the mandate over Palestine, Palestine was then between the entire area, between the Mediterranean and the Iraqian border. All of that was Palestine. There was one high commissioner and considered one country. The first partitioning of Palestine took place in 1922, when after the war, Great Britain saw fit to parcel out this area of the Middle East and give part of it to every one of the sheikhs who were helpful in the war. They had to do something also for Abdullah. So they partitioned Palestine, made the western part of the Jordan River Palestine. The eastern part was called Transjordan. The second time Palestine was partitioned was in 47, of course. Now, but until 22, all of that was one country, it was one Palestine. Of course, in Transjordan, or what is Jordan today, there are Bedouins, there are others, but you will not find one single country in this area, an Arab country, that hasn't various groups of Arab people. So to say that there is a Palestinian people as apart from those that are in Jordan, especially, this is not true to fact and not true to history. Now, between 48 and 67, after the War of Liberation, the Western Bank was later annexed by Abdullah, they were there. They were the majority in Jordan. If they wanted to set up a state, or to call that state Palestine, of course, they didn't have to ask our permission, and we would have had nothing to do with it. Therefore, when they say the Palestinian people want the right to their land, what it really means is to drive the Jews out of this area and take over, in addition to the about 19 or 20 independent Arab countries, all that have been created between the First and Second World War, create one more country instead of Israel. This is really what it is.
Mrs. Meir, it appears from what you say that you accept that Palestinians, or whatever you want to call them, refugees, have been made victims, one way or another, that they have a legitimate grievance. What can be done to meet their grievance, then?
They have become victims through the fact that after the United Nations in 47 decided on the partitioning of Palestine, mind you, west of the Jordan River, into a Jewish state and an Arab state, we accepted, and the Arab countries did not. And there was war. Can't imagine that there ever was a war without refugees. the difference is, in this case, that the Arab people who fled the area that became Israel afterwards were actually among their own people. For instance, we Jews are a classic nation of refugees. But when we were refugees, we were among strangers with different people who had different religion, who spoke a different language, a different culture, entirely different. These people are among their own people. It's the same language, the same religion, the same way of life. The fact that a line was drawn didn't make them any different. And but that they suffered, I accept. The question is, was that necessary? Because during that period, during these years, Israel has absorbed from the Arab countries a much larger number of Jews than the number of Arabs that left this area. Nobody speaks of Iraqi Jewish refugees in Israel, or Syrian Jewish refugees, or Moroccan Jewish refugees. Hundreds and hundreds of thousands of them. And anybody that knows the situation will agree that there was a greater clash between European Jews that came here, or Israeli Jews who have been here for centuries, generations, and Jews that came from Yemen, or Jews that came from, let's say, the Atlas Hills in Morocco. The only thing that really made us one was religion. We're Jews. We're one the same nation, but no common language, and sometimes centuries apart in culture, and yet we absorb them, and we're one people.
Is there anything, Mrs. Prime Minister, that Israel can do to remove this center of infection, really, a source of infection for the whole Middle East? These Arab refugees, these unsatisfied, unhappy people, unsettled, really. Because going around, as I've been doing the last few days, one still sees refugee camps that go back to 1948.
That's right.
Is there anything that Israel can do?
We have said immediately after the War of Liberation in 48, 49, that we are prepared to pay compensation for anything that these people have left behind, whether it's land, whether it's orange groves, whether it's houses, anything. We have allowed tens of thousands of them to come back because the families were separated during the fighting. And if part of the families remained here, and if they, no problem of security, we allowed them to come back. Now, the United Nations had a committee to investigate what these people left behind. And we cooperated with them. It comes up large sums of money. Now, if there had been peace, this money, the aid from international aid and from various governments, there's no doubt this thing would have been forgotten. And they would have been resettled in agriculture or in industry or in any other way. Instead, the United Nations during these years poured hundreds of millions of dollars into miserable camps. We found the camps now, for instance, in the Gaza Strip. It's unheard of that people should be kept in conditions of that kind. But it was done with this idea, the worse the better. These people must be miserable. They must live in conditions of that kind. They must not resettle and have a home of their own or so on, so that there will be an instrument against Israel.
What about the terrorism, Mrs. Meir? Israel takes a very firm line against terrorists, against hijackers. whereas other countries do not. What is the, even when the lives of others are involved, you say, don't give in to hijackers. What is your reasoning there, since innocent lives are at stake?
Innocent lives are always at stake. The question is, can innocent Israeli lives become a commodity that groups of men and women can just do with them whatever they like? Because when they take a plane, for instance, let us take the last incident, the one of Lufthansa in Germany. Nobody would say that it's a simple matter. Of course not. But look what happens. These men demand the release from prison of men who participated in the killing of our people in the Olympic Village. They say and practice, but they say openly, we want them out. As soon as they land in Libya, they make a statement, now we'll start all over again. So of course lives are involved. But it means that people are set free when everybody knows that what they intend to do at the first opportunity, they will kill more Israelis. It's a difficult problem. I don't say it's easy. But Israel cannot say, well, as long as it involves Israelis, it's all right.
Mr. Meir, it is sometimes suggested that terrorist organizations act out of a fear of a solution being arrived at between Israel and the Arab states. Is there a prospect of such a solution?
A solution between us and the Arab states?
Yes.
I'm sure there is. The question is when. Look, one must not, I think, look at the situation in the Middle East as though there are Arab countries that involve themselves in war with Israel, but it doesn't hurt them. It doesn't hurt their people. Their governments carry an immense war budget, but their countries develop and they have modern schooling and health services and so on. But for little Israel, it suffers. It's too bad about Israel. But it really doesn't matter. It doesn't affect so much the Arab countries. Of course, that's a distorted picture. Because as long as our Arab neighbors are at war with us, certainly they suffer at least as much as we do. As a matter of fact, we have managed with great difficulty to defend ourselves and at the same time to build a country which is more or less decent, more or less modern. It's not all that we wanted to happen or that could have happened if we didn't have to defend ourselves, but still we were 650,000 when the state was established. There are 800,000 children in school today, and we have compulsory free education from 5 and now from 4 to 15. There's not one single village in the country, no matter where it is, that is out of reach of a hospital or that there isn't a doctor in the area. And there's industry, there's modern agriculture, there is culture, there's music, there's theater. I mean, I say it isn't all that we want. We could have done much more. When in a country like this, we have a community of close to 50,000 young men and young women in institutions of higher learning. All this without practically one single month, I could say almost, without one single day of peace. Now, this isn't exactly what happened on the other side. So, war in this area is something that is hurtful to Israel and to the others, if it comes and when it comes, is a very important situation for Israel. We're not ashamed to say that we want peace, but also for the other countries. So anybody that is interested in this area must not fall into a way of thinking, well, there ought to be peace because Israel needs peace. The entire area needs peace. And the tens of millions of people in our neighboring Arab states, they are the main sufferers.
Are you suggesting then that it is because they are suffering, and it is because these countries are less well off than Israel is in the particulars you've cited, that there is some hope of peace, that will create the pressure for peace in Arab countries?
Yes, I don't think that our Arab neighbors will present us with a present of peace. The real tragedy is that the leaders of these tens of millions of people in the various Arab countries do not realize how essential it is for their people. If they did, I think we would have had peace many years ago.
Mrs. Prime Minister, that with Jordan it would not be a great problem, but that you would, for example, insist on holding the Golan Heights taken from Syria, and that might be a much more ticklish problem than the Jordan problem.
I don't want to...
negotiate on a television program.
No, I don't want to say to King Hussein that with Jordan there is no problem, because I don't think I would be honest if I said so. There are problems. I have to see his side of it too. There is Jerusalem. Not that Jordan had any claim on Jerusalem. It was never decided that Jerusalem or part of it should be Jordanian. What happened in 48 was by this breaking of this terrible principle of the inadmissibility of conquest by force. We were weak in 48. Jordan was much stronger. The Arab Legion was a good army at that time, led by British, trained by British, and they took part of Jerusalem. So I don't think he ought to get it back. I'm sure he won't, but he wants it back. That, at any rate, from his point of view, it's a problem. Then again, the Western Bank, you can't expect us to restore the boundaries where they were before, so that we again have about 12 miles between the sea and the former border. There are problems. They're not problems that cannot be solved. I think all problems between us and our neighbors can be solved. Why should the Golan Heights be such a serious problem from Syria unless they again want to be in a position where they can shell our villages in the valley? If they had no intention of that kind, and if they hadn't done what they did for so many years, there would have been no problem. Now they want us to come down again. Come down from the hill to the valley so that they can put up their guns up above. That's a problem.
Mr. Meir, the Russians withdrew from Egypt at the demand of Egypt. Did that fact make a settlement or make the prospect of peace, did it improve the prospect of peace in the Middle East?
Very many people thought so. We hoped so. But actually, if you analyze the situation, we have never said that the Russians are driving Egypt to war against us. I think for two reasons, to be fair to the Russians. I don't think it's a major point in their policy to destroy Israel. What they wanted to do is to buy themselves, or to buy their entrance into the Middle East on the basis of feeding Nasser or any other Arab leader what he wants most. And in 1955, they found that what Nasser wants most is not tractors and not modern industrial plants and schools and so on. What he wants most is tanks and planes in order to destroy Israel. But they were prepared to give it to them, to give it to him, and kept on giving it to him all the time. Now, when they left, we thought, well, if Sadat became disappointed with the Russians, on what ground? That Russia was not giving him enough material with which to destroy us. Maybe he'll make up his mind that, all right, he's lost this friend too. He doesn't believe the Americans will help him destroy Israel. Maybe then he should turn around and make peace with us. But that hasn't happened. You see, in all this, there's one more point that has to be taken into consideration. It's not only because we're committed to democracy and can't envisage a different regime. But look, whether it's Israel, whether it's the United States, any other democratic country, a government takes a decision which it is convinced of is good for the people. It's not always popular. It goes to its parliament, presents it, or whether the president says, doesn't make any difference, but there's a body democratically elected that has to deal with it. But let us take our form of government, British form of government. Suppose a government decides something, and we go to the parliament. What can happen? We lose the majority in parliament. So what? So there are new elections. When there are new elections, either we are re-elected or another party gets into government. The state remains. If we lose, we'll think it's too bad. The others can't do as well as we do. The other party will think they'll do better, but nobody is killed. There is no taking over by force. Nothing happens. Saddam or Nasser before him, or Assad in Syria, or the other one in Iraq, they always have to take into account that if they make a decision which is not popular, which is against the education that they gave their people, he'll lose his post. He'll not be president again. How will he not be president? He will not be re-elected? A few generals or lieutenants may come in any moment and at the point of a gun send him out. Send him where? To prison or a better place. His personal life is in danger. His being president is in danger. That he must think of, and he does. And this is the tragic part of this kind of regime of people. Dictators are supposed to be very brave people. It isn't so. It isn't true. They're afraid. They don't trust anybody around them, their dearest friends. Look what Stalin did to his people. Look how Sadat started. The first thing is sending people to jail. And I don't know, how does he take his decisions? Like I do? We sat at cabinet meeting today from 9 o'clock till 3 o'clock discussing things, differences of opinion, we have to take votes. I don't know whether he gets his ministers together and asks their advice. I don't know whether he doesn't get up one morning and says, well, now I'll do this, and does it. So this element, which is supposed to be a question of philosophical problem, what kind of regime, of a social problem, really in a situation of this kind in the Middle East, it's a question of life and death to many, many people.
Mrs. Meir, is it implicit in what you've been saying that the United States and the countries of Western Europe to whom Sadat applied after the Russians left, is it implicit in what you've been saying that they somehow missed the boat and that there was something they could have done?
No, not at all. First place, with all the failures in international life and international relations and so on, there is a certain basis of justice, of honesty, of decency. And when we say we're prepared to negotiate, and when we say we're even prepared to carry on indirect negotiations, well, what else is expected of us? What should be expected of us? Certainly the United States has adopted an attitude that we can't and should not be squeezed. The United States is prepared to help that the parties should negotiate, and I think European countries did the same. And now when Sadat went back to Russia, I'm not so sure whether he's so happy with what he's getting from his point of view, and I don't know how things will turn out. But first he sent them out, and he goes back to them. And I don't say that this means that, again, in the near future there will be 20,000 Russians in Egypt. But with the material that they sent come, what do you call them, advisors, instructors, like the part of those people. They're coming back in small numbers, I suppose.
Mrs. Meir, there are 2 points I'd like to ask you about in connection with the territories Israel occupied after the Six-Day War. One has to do with the establishment of Jewish settlements, Israeli settlements in those areas, and sometimes it is said that Israel is creating a fait accompli by settling in these areas, in some cases expelling Arab farmers to do so, in some cases, so it is said, driving people out of their houses to do so, destroying houses and the like. Maybe we just discuss first the question of settlement. What is it you are trying to do in the occupied territory?
Exactly what we're doing. In parts of the occupied territories, we're putting up settlements. That's true. We are not destroying Arab houses to put up settlements. We destroyed Arab houses in the miserable refugee camp in the Gaza Strip to widen the roads, right, also for security, because there were nests of terrorists, but also for the welfare of the people, covering up the sewage open canals that were there, and setting up other houses for them, by the way, putting in electricity and water and so on. Now, I know that people say that because we're putting up settlements now, we're as though making it difficult for Arab neighbors to negotiate with us. But immediately after the war, we didn't have settlements, and we were prepared to negotiate peace immediately after the war. Now, we never denied that we will not go back to the 67 borders. We said we want changes. And certainly these settlements represent changes in the borders. But that doesn't mean that we're not prepared to sit down and negotiate. On the contrary, we want to negotiate. And they're not, it isn't as though we come to a village, we drive the Arabs out, we destroy the houses and put a settlement around. There's nothing farther from the truth than this. It may be that sometimes somebody has to be moved a little bit, not villages, not masses, sometimes an individual house, but then always with compensation and always with rebuilding the house. No, we're not angels, but we're not that bad.
Well, on that point, Mr. Meir, I was reading that not merely that houses have been destroyed, which you deny or explain.
I want to say this too.
Yes.
For instance, there have been houses destroyed in the Gaza Strip, or very few also on the Western Bank, when these houses were nests of terrorists. That's true, but it had nothing to do with their settlement.
There's been no confiscation of land to give to Israeli farmers, for example. That has been written.
It's land that was state land, and it belonged to individual people, bought and paid for. And if they didn't want to accept the money now, at any rate, it's at their disposal, and we're prepared at any moment to negotiate.
Some of the land, I gather, is crown land belonging to the king.
That's right. Well, that's right. That's what we call state banks, crown banks.
I have also read that there have been some deportations and that there's been some indefinite detention without trial in the occupied areas.
Terrorists. Terrorists some who have been caught in action have been put to trial, and others who belong to terrorist organizations and helped and participated and so on are in administrative arrest. That's true. Lest people do not know, I think maybe it's worthwhile knowing that with all the terror that we had in the area, not one single, I can't say not one single death sentence. There were one or two death sentences, but no execution of one single person. Nobody was put to death. Not one. You see, in our civil laws, we did away with capital punishment. In our military courts, it is allowed for acts of war or treason or something like that. So that once or twice the military court decided a death sentence, and it was always changed to life sentence. Because government decided after 1967 that the death sentence should not be required. But sometimes the judges themselves, the case is so serious that despite that, they themselves decide on death sentence, but then it is always turned into a life sentence.
Mr. Meir, I want to change the subject rather radically, I'm afraid. You were born in Kiev. You moved to Pinsk, went to the United States in 1906 to Milwaukee. And you have said, let's leave out Milwaukee for the moment, we'll get to that later. You're known as the Meir who made Milwaukee famous because I think you were born across from the Schlitz Brewery.
Was it Pabst or Schlitz that made Milwaukee famous?
But I think for the sake of safety, I'll say both Schlitz and Pabst.
The beer, at any rate.
But before we get to the Milwaukee part of it, you were born in Russia. You went to the United States in 1906, and you have said if there's any logical direction that your life has taken, it's the desire and the determination to save Jewish children from experiences like those you knew in Tsarist Russia. How much of that lives in your memory?
But the Jewish people has a very long memory, collectively. And masses of individual Jews have a similar memory. In the United States, if there's still people of my generation, I mean immigrants at that time, this will be a repetitious story. It won't be Kiev, then it will be Vilna, then it will be Kovna, it will be Bialystok, it will be Moscow. It doesn't matter where it will be, but it's the same story. The same story. The first memory of many, many Jews, the first thing they remember, like I, is when my father and the upstairs neighbor were nailing up the doors because the rumors were that there's going to be another pogrom in Kiev. And this wasn't something that so outlandish. There were pogroms after. At that time, it did not happen. But the horror of standing there and watching what our fathers were doing and knowing that it may happen, that lives in the hearts of many people. Some people, despite that, took a different road. To me, this is something that, as I said, was consciously or not unconsciously, has decided my way in life.
Do you find yourself having anything in common then with the Russian Jews who are now coming to Israel?
Definitely, but with all Jews. Why not with Jews from the Jewish children, for instance, who live in the ghetto in Syria today and know what it means to live in a ghetto and under terror because they're Jewish? Or what happened during the Second World War, under Hitler. I mean, it's the same thing. It's a question of sovereignty. I have 2 generations now of my own that were born here. This is one of the greatest, maybe the greatest thing in my personal life, certainly, that I have a son and a daughter and 5 grandchildren to whom what I tell them about my childhood is a story. They know that that's modern Jewish history and ancient Jewish history, but as far as their personal life is concerned, they knew no fear of that. There were wars. That's true. My granddaughter is through with the army service now. My children were in all the wars. But no fear of a pogrom. No fear of having to hide away.
About the Russian Jews who are coming here now, because that is a subject, obviously, that arouses enormous interest. Do you find that the Russian government, the Soviet government, responds to pressure from the outside?
Undoubtedly. Undoubtedly. This is the only thing that really can influence Russia. And look, with all that we have to say against Russia now, believe me, we have a lot to say against it. Still, we're getting some immigration, something we didn't have several years ago. Now, Stalin couldn't have cared less what the world thought about him or about Russia. Khrushchev was different. These people certainly are different, and the situation in Russia is such. I must give credit to these people at least for one thing, even if it hurts me. They have a situation among their people in their country. They're desperately in need of help in the Western world. They have the courage to go to the Western world and ask for it and try to come to some arrangement where they can get it. There's no doubt pressure from the West, from the world, that people cannot be treated that way. People, after all, what do the Jews want in Russia? They want to go to Israel. They're not going out to attack Russia. They should be allowed to do it without misery, without being sent to prison, without being sent to insane asylums, without being sent to Siberia.
Do you have any idea how many of them want to come out?
Nobody has any idea. And if sometimes we hear from the Russians say very few Jews want to come out, all the more reason that they really believe that it's only very few Jews to let them go. And if it proves that there are many, let the many go. Every free country does that to its people. Because they could have had so much goodwill if they let the people go. And I hope they still will come to that conclusion. What is happening now, they are allowing some people to go. Then they put ransom on people. Then some people they send to Siberia. And instead of gaining goodwill, they're destroying it.
Mr. Meir, there used to be a lot of talk, maybe it was a lot of guesswork, about the absorptive capacity of Israel. How many people you could actually have in this country support? How many people could actually support themselves, I should say. Is there a current figure that the Israeli government has in mind or not?
You know that between the day that Great Britain got the mandate over Israel and the day and our independence, I think there were 20-odd royal commissions that came. So one royal commission once said, you can't, the country is so overcrowded that you can't turn a cat, swing a cat. We wanted to swing cats. We wanted to have people in the country. Then another royal commission said, not one more drop of water in this country. And of course, absorptive capacity, that was the problem. And Dr. Weitzman once said, what is absorptive capacity? Every Jew that comes to then Palestine, in his suitcase, there's absorptive capacity for a few more Jews. And here we are. Now the population is very, very close to 3 million. And now we know that so much of our country is still uncultivated and not settled, And things are developing. Instead of a tract of a farm of so many acres, which were necessary for a family when we didn't have irrigation, there were no modern methods of agriculture. Now that same plot can support 4 families. And then industry and science and technology. There's no limit, really. No limit. We're not a people of 200 million. But the numbers that we have, we can take.
Was there ever a time, Mrs. Meir, when you were in the United States, where you lived for quite a while, that you thought of staying there? That you thought you might be an American?
Before I came here?
Yes.
Well, I suppose when I came there when I was 8, I became a Zionist, labor Zionist to be more correct, during the First World War. I didn't join the labor Zionist party until I decided that I would come to Palestine. Somehow I couldn't understand the idea that I'm for a Jewish state, but I'll live in Milwaukee. So there weren't very many years. And God knows it's not because the United States was not good to us, and not because I didn't appreciate all that it had to generate, the difference between Zionism and the United States. But it's because of the Jewishness in me. And because of this peculiar streak that if you believe something, you should go and try to accomplish it. So although I lived in the United States until I was 23, came here in 21. But out of these years, quite a few number of years, I was involved in Zionist activity.
We only have about 2 minutes left, Mrs. Meir, and I do want to ask you a bit more about the past. You arrived in Tel Aviv in July 1921.
Was it hot?
You became a teacher in a kibbutz, but you also, as I've read, picked almonds, you minded chickens, and you cared for children. You were married by that time, of course. And over the years, so I've read, you have never been to a beauty parlor. You have a very limited wardrobe. You've had very little leisure. Do you regret any of it? Do you?
First, I must correct something which is more important than everything else. I was not a teacher in a kibbutz. I took care of poultry.
Oh.
And I baked bread and washed clothes. I'm a realist. And I suppose if I believed that if I go to a beauty parlor, I would really be beautiful, I suppose I would have done it. But I knew that it won't help. This is it, I have to live with it. I certainly never regretted a thing in my life. I have more joy and satisfaction in my life than I will ever be able to tell of. When a person in his own life sees a revolution of this kind, sees the Jewish people as a people of refugees, and a people that is either killed by some and pitied by the rest. A sovereign people, back in its own land, there are many problems and many troubles and so on, but still acting on its own, not pitied anymore at any rate. What else can a person want?
Thank you very much, Mrs. Meir.
Thank you.
Golda Meir has been speaking freely. Edwin Newman, NBC News.
This is a special one-hour edition of Face the Nation with Prime Minister Golda Meir in Israel and a second half hour live from Washington with White House Chief of Staff General Alexander Haig. First, Prime Minister Meir.
Prime Minister Meir, President Nixon has said that this is the best chance for true peace in the Middle East in at least 20 years. Do you believe that out of this latest war, a real and lasting peace can be brought?
I can't be sure. As far as we are concerned, it should have been 25 years ago. It should have been in 56. It should have been in 67. It should have been in 69. I mean, if it was necessary to fight a war and for our Arab neighbors to lose in order to bring about peace, they had these opportunities. I hope that this will happen this time. But it depends entirely upon them whether they really think that peace is more important than fighting a war. I'm not even saying winning a war, because that they have never experienced, thank God. But it seems that it's more important for them to fight a war, even if they lose it, than to make some step towards peace. With all my heart, I hope that this time it will be different.
In Tel Aviv, Israel, Face the Nation, a spontaneous and unrehearsed news interview with the Prime Minister of Israel, Golda Meir. Mrs. Meir will be questioned by Terence Smith of the New York Times, CBS News correspondent George Herman, and CBS News correspondent Tom Fenton. Face the Nation is produced by CBS News, which is solely responsible for the selection of today's guest and panel.
Mrs. Meir, what President Nixon said was that there was the best chance for peace. He made no statement that there would be a real peace, but that there was the best chance for peace. Do you estimate that, from what you learned, that there is this chance for peace among the Arabs as well as among the Israelis?
What I really, the only thing that I can honestly say is that we hope so. Because so far, from the Syrians and the Egyptians, there was not one single word said that one can say, well, look, this is something new. But I hope so. We can never make up our minds that there's no hope for peace. And certainly we shall do everything within our power to make it possible.
Mrs. Meir, when this whole prospect of negotiations is thought of to come in the near future, can you tell us when and where and under what auspices Israel would like to see these talks begin?
As far as when and where is considered, as far as we're concerned, every hour is the good hour to begin. Every place in the world is the good place to meet.
And under what auspices?
Under what auspices? We'll listen, and we'll make up our minds, and I don't think there'll be any trouble as far as that's concerned either.
Mrs. Meir, before the war, Israel seemed to be moving towards greater independence from the United States in terms of arms and was moving towards self-sufficiency. In view of what's happened now, do you think this is a realistic goal in the next few years?
I don't think this is exactly true. It's true that we have been becoming more and more self-sufficient in arms, but it wouldn't be true we say that we were self-sufficient. And we got a lot of help from the United States in allowing us to buy arms from the United States even before. But now I think we will have to do two things. We will have to produce more on our own and probably ask our friends to sell us more even in the future, as long as there isn't a realistic hope for peace. Because I don't know whether it was necessary for additional proof to the world what our situation is. Supposing that we did not have the arms that we had, supposing that our men were not as they are, what would have happened to us?
As you possibly move into negotiations, are you concerned about this great dependency on the United States?
Maybe it's semantics. But instead of calling it dependency, I would like to see it rather in a relationship of friendship between, two equals, the United States and Israel. far as size is concerned and so on. But seriously speaking, I would like to see it as a question of, as a matter of friendship and the understanding of the largest power in the world, that a small nation, no matter how small, should not be at the mercy of anybody that wants to bully it.
Mrs. Meir,
And I think it's as important for the United States as it is for Israel. It certainly is as important for the world. If Israel can be bullied by others and everybody else standing aside, that's happened in history before. Czechoslovakia was offered.
But you had a speech to the Knesset in which you outlined three dangerous things. You said that a ceasefire arranged by the superpowers, and I believe you said mainly in their own interests, is a dangerous thing. A world in which Israel has lost most of its former enthusiastic friends is a dangerous thing. And you were referring to other nations besides not the United States, but to other nations. And then, of course, enemies who possess most of the world's oil is a dangerous thing. Now, those first two dangerous things, I think, are the ones we're interested in. One in which you have lost the support of many small nations who were friends of yours before, and one in which you talk about a ceasefire arranged not by you, but by superpowers for their interests.
Look, I don't equate the two superpowers. It does not mean that we do not, from time to time, have differences of opinion, sometimes rather painful ones, with the United States. I don't want to paint this as an idyllic picture. The United States has its interests, we have ours. I think most phases of interest, as far as peace is concerned and so on, we are at one, but these are two different nations. So I wouldn't want to equate the Soviet Union, for instance, with the United States. That would be absolutely unfair, and I think not truthful. But it's true. It would be much better if the Egyptians and we had arranged it. But as long as the Egyptians don't want to do a thing of that kind, there's no...
But now you are talking. You've had a meeting of military officers between Egypt and Israel. Is that a breakthrough? Is that a start of something real?
This is the first time that something like this has taken place. We suggested it. We were very happy it was accepted. From what I heard this morning, and I haven't yet a full report, the atmosphere at any rate was good. There are possibilities, and I think realistic possibilities for future meetings. Now, if you want me to say, does this mean that it leads directly to peace quickly? I can't say that, but it's a good start. I hope so.
It is a good start.
It's a start that people begin to talk.
Has it, Mrs. Meir, been followed by any assurance to you from Dr. Kissinger or any other source that, in fact, the political leaders in the Arab world, President Sadat and the Egyptian leaders, are willing to come and sit down and talk with Israel the way this military officer did yesterday?
No. I think what has been said is that the United States and Russia together now are committed, according to the third article of the Security Council resolution, that there will be negotiations between the parties.
But that's all you have, that piece of paper.
This time, between the parties.
Not a promise.
Well, I don't think they can promise, but that both of them are committed to try to influence the two parties to get together, that yes.
Mrs. Meir, you now hold a large number, perhaps 5,000 Arab prisoners of war, and they hold in turn a number of Israeli prisoners of war. What moves have you made so far to attempt an exchange?
Well, the situation is such that we haven't even received a list of the prisoners of war. Against all international conventions, we have thousands of prisoners of war, and we are giving them lists through the Red Cross constantly. We are treating the wounded. The Red Cross can visit the Egyptian or Syrian wounded soldiers, and they do. We did not receive a list of our prisoners of war to this day. The Red Cross was not allowed until this minute to visit our wounded men either in Syria or in Egypt, and certainly they have not released the wounded people, as it is they're supposed to do according to the Geneva Convention. We have done all this. We are sending a batch of, I think, 700 wounded prisoners. We're releasing them today. The Red Cross, about 2,000 wounded prisoners. We're prepared to release them, but they must also perform their part of the convention.
Will you move into negotiations with the Egyptians if this question isn't settled ahead of time? I'm now talking about peace negotiations.
Look, we don't want to put up conditions of peace, whether there are peace negotiations or not. International law, international conventions have not been made only for Israel. Both sides must comply. Of course we want peace, but supposing there is no peace, and supposing Sadat does not want to negotiate for peace, well, what about the International Convention, which says exactly what should be done with the wounded soldiers and Red Cross, the position of Red Cross? This has nothing to do with negotiations.
Is this a political, diplomatic question, or is this something which might be suitable for discussion by the military officers who have been meeting? Or are they confining themselves strictly to the local issue of the Egyptian Third Army?
No, this question was raised by our representative. It will be raised in every forum.
At the military meeting?
At any meeting. We cannot just give up our men to the mercy of Sadat or Assad.
Mrs. Meir, the way you talk, it appears that you don't consider peace negotiations an urgent question. How long can Israel continue to win wars at this price?
Really, I know that one must not judge the attitude of the one that asks the question, so I don't think that that's really what you mean. It isn't a question that we are not anxious for peace negotiations. But we have lived with this for 25 years and before. So we say, yes, by all means, any day, any hour, anywhere, we are prepared to immediately go into peace negotiations, under auspices or under no auspices. But it doesn't mean that I can forget that there are men who are now in the hands of the Syrians and Egyptians. From past experience, we know exactly how these men are treated, some of them wounded, maybe some of them seriously wounded, and the other side does not live up to the Geneva Convention.
Mrs. Meir,
this has nothing to do with peace negotiations.
No,
and it does not mean that I don't want peace negotiations.
Mrs. Meir, we've talked so far about Egypt and the possibility of negotiations with them, and at least you have an initial contact. What about the other front? What about Syria? This has always been a more difficult nut to crack from Israel's point of view. Is there any prospect of negotiations with Syria?
I don't know. I don't even know whether... I don't imagine that negotiations, if they start and when they start, and I hope they do as quickly as possible, that they will be with both parties together. As far as we're concerned, it's all right. We can meet in the morning with Egypt and in the afternoon with Syria, or vice versa. But I suppose it will be handled with one party at a time. I think it was more is said about Egypt because it is accepted in the world, I don't know why, that the Egyptians are more forthcoming.
Have the Russians undertaken to pressure Syria as they say they have Egypt into negotiating?
I don't know whether they have undertaken to pressure anybody.
Persuade, if you prefer.
I think mainly Egypt. But really, I don't know. Maybe they also Syria. But Syria has always taken a tougher stand at any rate. This is the first time that they agreed to a Security Council resolution where the 242 is mentioned and where negotiation between the parties is mentioned. They've agreed to it. I hope they'll live up to it.
In fact, there's something of a build-up on the Syrian front. In the last several days, there have been additional Soviet tanks inserted into the lines. I think the Jordanian units there have been built up. Do you think that there's a threat there of a renewal of fighting?
I don't think so, but we had no illusions. There was no doubt in my mind nor in the mind of anybody that the Soviets have given up. They prepared, I think they prepared this war in the same way as they prepared the 67 war. Otherwise, how could you have an airlift and material arriving by boat practically in a few hours after the war started? So good even the Soviets are not. They can't fly boats. But everything began coming in massive quantities, and they've done it before. They're doing it now. There's no doubt in my mind.
Can you give me just one word? I'm going back to a little bit of old history. 2 weeks old, I guess, in Israel is not very old. But what happened at the beginning? Did Israel know there was going to be attack and take the calculated judgment that for political, diplomatic reasons it would sustain the first attack?
Yes.
Mrs. Meir, what was the basic reason for that decision? Was it the fear of losing American arms aid?
It wasn't only American arms aid. Of course, we wanted this time, it was a calculated risk.
Did you guess wrongly as to how badly it would hurt you?
I don't know. I don't know how much less we would have been hurt otherwise. But it was a calculated risk to the extent that we did not want to create a situation where we will talk ourselves blue in the face saying that we did not start the war, we did not cause the war, and friends who are not so friendly, and even our best friends will say, yes, if you only had not done that, we could have helped you more.
Would you take that risk again?
It depends upon. I'm speaking now for myself. If this is taken into consideration in all the arrangements that have to be made, we'll say, well, we paid for it, we suffered for it, but in the end, it balances well. But if we are treated as though we started the war, and as though we are responsible, then I don't know what will happen.
How can you explain this lack of sympathy in the world for a country that was attacked?
I don't think this is a sentimental world. But even when countries and governments deal, so say, realistically and only on the basis of expediency, they don't understand, I think, and that's maybe an audacity on my part to say it, they don't understand how wrong they are. After all, we don't have to go back to ancient history. All this happened only about 30 years ago, when people thought a big power was bigger than it is to now, United Kingdom, and a gentleman who I'm sure wanted peace in the world, Mr. Chamberlain, said, well, look, this is what we have to weigh. Either we support Czechoslovakia or we have war. They gave up Czechoslovakia to Hitler, and there was war.
Mrs. Meir, let's go back to another bit of history. The question of Palestinian refugees has always been basic to the Middle East conflict. If you get into negotiations with any of the Arab countries, what, if anything, are you prepared to offer to settle this question?
For refugees, there's no problem of a solution. If you're talking about refugees, they should have been out of the camps 20 years ago. We took out of the camps many refugees in the Gaza Strip since the Six-Day War. But there is room for the refugees in Jordan, and there is no doubt that if they want a peaceful solution, Jordan is the natural place for Palestinians if they want to live there. There are 20 independent Arab countries, but if the Palestinians want to come to more of self-expression, there's no doubt that between Israel and Iraq, there will be one Arab state, that is Jordan, and that part, after we come to a peace agreement with Jordan, what is across the border of Israel, that's an Arab state, that's Jordan. They call it Palestine, Jordan. Jordan, Palestine doesn't make a bit of difference. Jordan always had almost a majority of former Palestinians.
I presume when you're talking about Jordan now, you're not including what used to be called the West Bank of Jordan.
No, I said definitely that when we come to a peace agreement with Jordan, and there's a line, there's a boundary, there's a border, what is across that border is Jordan, the East Bank, and if there will be anything else from the West Bank, that's Jordan. That's the home for the Palestinians.
Jordan, in fact, has been the quiet border in this war, although Jordanian units were involved up in Syria. How has that fact that you did not go directly to war as you did in '67 changed your relations with Jordan and perhaps the prospects of negotiating a peace with them?
You know that since the Six-Day War, the Jordanian border was open. There were open bridges, people coming and people going, and we didn't want to disrupt it 5 seconds before we absolutely have to. Now, this I know this is an abnormal situation. Here is a state with whom there is no peace. The borders are open, the bridges are open. He sends his tanks into Syria. His tanks joined the fighting. There's no doubt that some of our men were hit by his tanks, and yet we do nothing on the border because until the last moment, unless we have to, we want to make it possible that there's some possibilities for peace.
Isn't it even
Can you
more
build on that now?
Pardon?
Can you build on that now? Is there any, or has there been any contact with the...
Since the war?
Yes.
No.
Is there still trade, or was that disrupted by the
No,
war?
nothing was disrupted.
So there was still trade with Jordan?
Everything. Everything gets...
So that when Jordanian troops went north, a lot of them were in trucks rolling on Israeli-made tires?
Maybe.
All right, now you mentioned...
I don't know.
You mentioned...
Not the tanks, really.
Not the tanks, but the trucks. You mentioned before the question of suffering this attack. The Institute for Strategic Studies in London estimates that you have suffered about 5,000 casualties. Is that way off the beam, dead and wounded?
I think that's off the beam, but
Is
we
it-
suffered a lot.
You suffered
We
less
suffered.
than that?
Less than that, but we suffered a lot.
Can you afford any more? How many more such victories can this country afford with its small population?
Can we afford to live?
I guess.
Mrs. Meir, before the war, the Israeli policy seemed to be that the Arabs would not come to the negotiating table until they had literally nothing else to do, until they came out of desperation. Now one of the combatants has had some success, some small success. He has troops on your side of the Suez Canal, and there are perhaps prospects for negotiations. Does this indicate perhaps that the original theory was not correct?
We are convinced that we will remain in this area, and Egypt will remain in this area, and all the other our neighbors. We are always looking forward to a possibility, to a hope, that we will live together and we will cooperate. And there will be real decent human relationship between our countries. Now, with that in mind, we don't want to make him feel that he is frustrated, that he's been humiliated. We've never acted like that, for instance. And so he didn't have to go to war to prove that. His great victory in war is not so great. He did something on our side of the canal. We're on the other side. We've never been on the other side.
Let me ask you about that, because I think that's very important in the time we have left. One of Israel's arguments has always been it must have secure and defensible borders. Where your ceasefire is now is hardly something that could be described as secure and defensible. It's a crazy quilted zigzag.
Yes, of course.
Isn't that a big incentive to negotiation?
So we're prepared to negotiate. I mean, who needs the incentive? I want to tell you something. Sadat must be given time to enjoy his defeat. And not to immediately, by political manipulations, turn that into a victory. Not because I want him defeated or humiliated, but for God's sake, he starts a war. Our people are killed. His and the many thousands are killed. And he has been defeated. And then, by political arrangements, he's handed a victory and has become, or he thinks, has become a hero in the eyes of the Egyptian people. Does that help him?
Are you afraid that's going to happen?
I hope not. But a few things have happened the last few days that make me worry.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Meir, for being with us today on Face the Nation.
I think for any Jew, if he has a basic interest in the continuity of the Jewish people, then he cannot divide it from the security and life of Israel. Then it becomes one.
On the immigrant ships, refugees from war-torn Europe, and they shall dwell in a new land. From the traumas and debris of the Holocaust, the chance for a new life. From Europe, from the countries of the Near East, they began with a prayer, in tent cities, much like their ancestors of old. And they prayed to start again in freedom, and they dreamed the impossible. Those whose lives had been decimated had a chance to live once more, to raise their children in dignity and with hope for the future.
We have accomplished something that generations upon generations of Jews died for. And Israel is not obstinate and intransigent. The Jewish people has been. If not, we would have been long forgotten. It would have been somewhere in history we would read or study that there was such a thing as the Jewish people.
Jews from more than 100 countries, from all the lands of the Jewish dispersion. After World War II, survivors of the Holocaust. In the first years of the state, from Iraq, Morocco, and the Arab countries of the Middle East. And more recently, from the Soviet Union.
I am coming to my family, to my land, and to my people.
An ember of Jewish longing still smolders after a half-century of communism. Families reunited in Israel. The struggle of Soviet Jewry to escape to freedom continues. Here in Petah Tikva, Golda meets with a group of Russian immigrants newly arrived in Israel. I have met many times with immigrants from the Soviet Union, and believe me when I tell you that each meeting moves me so much that I haven't the words to express my feelings. It was, after all, a dream, a great and long dream from 1917. Once, a dream, to build a country from the sand, from the gritty, rocky soil of desert. Today, Moshav Shachar in the Lachish area, between Beersheba and Ashdod, founded in 1951. Once, sand. Today, a flourishing agricultural way of life, using all the tools of modern farming. Once, a dream, to bring the people to the land, to give them purpose, and provide them with the tools that they may sustain themselves. People like Yitzhak ben Dahan, one of the founders of Moshav Shachar. He has worked long, hard hours to make Moshav Shachar more than a dream. Born in Morocco, married, father of 9 children, including Yael. When I came to Moshav Shachar, there was nothing here. It was empty, miserable. I saw only sky and earth. There were even wild animals here, and we were very frightened. The beginning was hard, but slowly, as we worked, we grew to love the place.
And when you see Lachish today, and you say why I say I'm blessed, isn't it something for a person in his life to see nothing, plus nothing, as far as the knowledge of the people was concerned, as far as their preparedness to do things of this kind, and look what happened. So this happened in Lachish, this happened in hundreds of Moshavim, people that came from countries with that absolutely nothing to do with agriculture. They never put a seed in the soil, they never planted a tree, and they're feeding Europe. But it isn't only Lachish. It's hundreds of villages. It's towns. You go to Dimona, it's a beautiful city. Ashkelon, Ashdod, Kiryat Shmona. What was Ashdod? Sand. Just sand. I remember the first few wooden shacks that we put up in Ashdod, that we put up in Dimona. And here it is. But I'm glad that we're not satisfied. I become impatient when people say everything is bad, nothing has been done. Well, that's not true. It's just not true. But that we haven't been able to do everything that we wanted to do that should be done, that's true. But then you always have to remember, we fought 5 wars. It makes a lot of difference.
The price of war in every area of life. Every step, a struggle. Ammunition Hill, Jerusalem, where 51 Israeli soldiers died. They asked a soldier here, on Ammunition Hill, what pushed you to fight so hard in this place? A soldier was asked, what made you fight? And he said, I wanted to live. I wanted to live.
I don't know if there's any other nation in the world that hates war more than we do. Even all those that preach to us and so on. But it's conscious of the fact that either or. Either we're capable of defending ourselves or we're gone.
The normal problems, expanding education for Israel's young in an increasingly technological society. And the special problems, a deaf child, special care and teaching for those who need it, nurturing the young to give them too a future.
There's no limit to what can be done. There's no limit to what we can do here. There's no limit to what Jews can do outside of Israel. And we have a lot of housing to do. Schools, our classes are too crowded in elementary schools. I think there's much that we have to learn in the environment, raising the standard of housing and education and living of quite a part of the population. My God, wonders could be accomplished. The Jewish people, continuity of the Jewish people, and the safety and security of Israel is one thing. You can't divide it. And the Jews, whether they figure it out to that extent or not, they instinctively feel it. This is not something they're helping that has nothing to do with them. Or not nothing to do with them, but it doesn't really affect them. It does. And whether they know it logically or whether they feel it instinctively, This is it.
Once they came on the wings of eagles. Today, they are in a dwelling and a home. It's been a long journey. And we have helped them come a long way. We've helped make the difference. Much remains. We can help them travel farther still. Partners in a lifeline to tomorrow.
כאב חבוד